within your body to maximize your power and keep your opponent in the dark. Hard to believe that you're so far in such little time. I didn't believe you would be up this early. What do you expect? Now that I think about it, what are you two punch jockeys doing on my world? Then let me guess. All it took to get on this good side was something high in calories. Oh, no way. I never want your job. All I want is to get stung. Oh, if you were too dumb to think of it. Never ceases to amaze terribly you two get along. Probably floating through asteroid belt and nebula. Drop things. I'm only going to ask you this once more. You've gone repeating. Yes, that's right, my lord. Quality, my lord, and to maximize your enjoyment in the future. Their food is gourmet.
Hey, yeah, my mom lives here. What do you want?
It's gourmet.
Hey, yeah, my mom lives here. What do you want?
Fascinating. Speaking of time, we don't have any. I need you to call Boma right now.
You think he's one of your mom's friends or what? Where'd you buy that? It's pretty funny.
Mask? What are you talking about? It's my face. So get off me. I'm not at school. I'm gonna die. Now, will you please hurry and get Boma?
Oh, boss. What's your name, mister?
No!
Those names.
Your child's a handful. Hey, no touching a super electric patrol car. We're up on that. Wait, you're telling me that a child defeated the evil emperor?
Hey everyone, you know tropical cyclones are some powerful natural events that take place on our planet, with powerful winds, torrential rain, and a number of unusual weather phenomena. They form over oceans and they can happen anywhere in the world. Conditions develop. It's when they happen in the Atlantic Ocean or the Northeast that they become known as hurricanes. They reach a certain intensity. The islands in their path and the coastline of the Americas was that. Join me for today's video. We're going to take powerful hurricanes in history. Number 15, Hurricane Katrina. 5. Cyclone to develop 2005 Atlantic hurricane season. Originally developed on the 3rd of August in that year near the West Islands. A combination of remnants of the previous tropical wave and within days had been classified as a tropical storm past the Bahamas. On Monday 24th, it intensified into a hurricane hours before it made landfall in southern Florida. Weakening from this point, far from done, it's back out into the Gulf. First, Category 3, Category 5.
Dang.
As hurricanes were in the Gulf. That lay in its it struck in bursts
Oh, but Pete.
and would continue. Finally being the other storm of the east for 120 miles an hour as it passed land. Katrina devastation, particularly in New Orleans. By the time it had finished, it estimated to have caused more than 1,800 deaths and at least $5 billion worth of damage. Disastrous hurricanes and an event the affected community covering from 14. Hurricane Camille, 1969. Hurricane Camille hurricane to form during the 1969 season and gave mainland residents time to prepare after forming just to the south of Cuba. It struck the island as a Category 2 storm, tracked into the Gulf of Mexico where it was intensified into a Category 5. And ahead towards only 4 Category 5s to make landfall. 275 miles at its peak, but luckily, quickly, high Central Valley and had become a tropical depression. It went back out to sea, where it was increased into a tropical storm, what was a storm in the North Atlantic. 24 feet, however, Camille flattened everything, strongest of building, and 259 caused as much as Number 13, Hurricane Janet. Particularly eventful. Janet, which first formed near the Lesser Antilles on the 21st of September, still one of the storms to have been recorded in the Atlantic. It was the first named storm to have caused 7,000 deaths. And at this time, created a strength to keep winds over 175 miles an hour, making it a Category 5. In large areas of the Grenadines and Barbados, the only hurricane to have destroyed were reconnaissance aircraft that had been sent to monitor it. By September 29th, the landfall on the first Category 5 known to have struck the mainland, triggered huge flooding in areas that had already been affected by 2 hurricanes. In Mexico, were left standing after passed, and by the time it had dissipated, 1,020 deaths had been attributed to it. Chance of rebuilding. Number 12, Hurricane of Santa Cruz del Sur, 1930. Known as the Cuba hurricane. To have power struck the Caribbean.
It's gone.
On October 3rd, westwards into the sea, it continued to build. It did so. Category 5 by November 6th, which had strength in the Atlantic to in November. It became a category. Landfall in Cuba in the Cameroon province passed over the island. It was responsible for damage to virtually every structure in its path, and over the weekend, once it had gone back out to sea and headed towards the Bahamas and Bermuda. As well as being powerful, this hurricane was also particularly large. Some of the effects were felt on numerous surrounding islands, and as the coast of Colombia, it was Santa Cruz del Sur, affected by feet, wiped out almost everything. There was 2,870 of the human deaths happened. 11, Hurricane Irma, 2017. Irma first formed from a tropical wave near Cape Verde Islands on August. It continued the intensity of the Atlantic. Was at the time the most powerful hurricane to have been seen on the open ocean. A heavy Category 5 storm measuring 100 miles an hour. What was unusual about Irma was that it underwent several eye-roll replacement cycles. As it traveled, meant that by the time it was at full speed, the track pretty much took it across the island chain, which saw it tear across St. West Virgin Island. 2 weeks after a powerful event and extreme flooding, Irma magnified those effects with devastated the Florida. As it moved into Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama before fading away. For all of this, it's killed around 135 people. The costliest hurricane on record with almost $80 billion. Hurricane Rick, 2009. The record for being the most powerful hurricane ever recorded. Rick first began to develop off Mexico's southern shore 15. Perfect conditions for a storm. Power from a tropical depression to a hurricane in 4 hours. On October 17th, Category 5 with wind speed 180 miles an hour. It took this for several hours before the conditions changed and they began to weaken. And after taking the north in Baja California Sur and made landfall in the city of Mazatlan. By this time, the wind speeds had fallen to around 6 miles per hour. Fortunately, most residents had been evacuated or taken shelter. And by the time it had ended, the hurricane had killed 3 people. $1 worth of damage. Something that's widely seen as a thing, considering how strong it had once and the precipitation that would have been caused if it had remained a Category 5. Hurricane Rita, 2005. The 2005 hurricane season always remembered because of the devastation that was caused by Hurricane Katrina. It was the second most active season in history that saw three of the most intense hurricanes ever. 10th hurricane forming on September 18th. Bahamas from a tropical wave that had traveled across Africa. It moved westward through the Caribbean, and while this didn't appear to be power too much, change reached the Florida Straits with a perfect mix of prevailing wind. On September 20th, wind speeds of 180 miles per hour, having seen the destruction of Katrina just a few weeks earlier and with Rita track. A serious blow to a Category 3 before making landfall in Louisiana. It enough to overwhelm wide communities along the coastline with storm surge that would cause 120. Wait. Let me tell you what I'm gonna do right quick. Listen, I'm gonna start from before we get to the next. Near the Bahamas from a tropical wave that had traveled across the Atlantic from the coast of Africa. It moved westward through the Caribbean, and while it appeared to be increasing in power too much, this all changed when it reached the Florida Straits. With a perfect mix of warm, prevailing winds, Rita intensified to a Category 5 on September 21st, with sustained wind speeds of 180 miles per hour. Having seen the destruction of Katrina just a few weeks earlier, and with Rita following in a similar track, there were worries that the humanitarian disaster was being dealt with Syria. It dropped to a Category 3 before making landfall in Louisiana. It was still significant enough to overwhelm low-lying communities along the coastline with the storm surge and would cause 120 deaths and $18.5 billion worth of damage. But in many ways, a potential catastrophe was fortunately avoided. Number 8. Hurricane Mitch, 1998. Hurricane Mitch was the ninth hurricane of the 1998 season after forming in the western Caribbean Sea on October 22nd, and will go on to become the second deadliest Atlantic hurricane on record. To a Category 5 with wind speeds of 180 miles an hour, weakened again before making landfall in Honduras, or passing across into Central America into the Bay of Campeche, and then into Cuba as a tropical storm. Despite having lost the intensity of its peak before it reached anywhere that was inhabited, the track of this hurricane took it across a number of communities that were simply unprepared for a storm like it. Caused untold damage and destruction, particularly in Honduras. Around 35,000 homes were destroyed, with a further 50,000 suffering damage. And this displaced 1.5 million people, which is approximately a fifth of the country's total population. In Honduras alone, 7,000 people are believed to have died because of the hurricane, with a further 5,000 fatalities elsewhere, as well as 11,000 who were missing. And in total, the cost to repair the damage was estimated at around $8 billion. At the time, the president of Honduras said that it should set the country back 50 years in terms of economic development, and the effects of it still continue almost 25 years later. Number 7. Hurricane Dorian, 2019. After forming over the central Atlantic Ocean on August 24, 2019, Hurricane Dorian was the second hurricane of that year's season, and would become not only the most powerful to hit the Bahamas, but also the joint record for having the highest recorded wind speeds of an Atlantic hurricane at that point of landfall. After moving through the Lesser Antilles and picking up strength, it was classified as a hurricane as it passed the Greater Antilles on August 28th, and then rapidly intensified in the following days to reach a Category 5, with sustained wind speeds of 185 miles an hour. First that it made landfall at Elbow Key in the Bahamas, before moving to Grand Bahama. To the currents in the Caribbean Sea at the time, it stayed over the Bahamas for a day while losing its intensity, and then began moving in another direction, and made landfall as a Category 2 on Hatteras, North Carolina on September 6th. It continued the coast to strengthen Georgia and Newfoundland in Canada with hurricane-force winds, finally dissipated on September 10th. The storm caused 84 confirmed deaths, with 245 people going missing, and around $5 billion worth of damage, almost all of which happened in the Bahamas. Number 6. Hurricane Linda, 1997. One of the most powerful Pacific hurricanes to have ever been detected, Hurricane Linda formed off the coast of Panama on September 9, 1997. A tropical wave that's believed to have originated near Africa and traveled across the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Central America before reaching the Pacific. Within 36 hours, it was classified as a hurricane and began moving northwestward while at the same time experiencing an intensification process called explosion. A hurricane by September 12, between 180 and 195 miles an hour, with intermittent reaching 220 miles per hour. At this stage, it passed close to Socorro Island, and the model suggested that there was a chance that it would begin heading towards California. These proved to be wrong, though, and after moving through cooler waters, it deteriorated, and by September 18th, it was no longer even classified as a tropical cyclone. As it never made landfall, fatalities were hurricane, but it added valuable data to the models to understand how storms may act in the future. Of particular interest to researchers is just how quickly Linda died, and soon turned a seemingly harmless storm to one that could be significant. Continued along the coast in water. 5. Hurricane Wilma, 2005. Hurricane Wilma was the third of powerful hurricanes developed in the 2005 season, along with Katrina and Rita, and was the most intense hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin based on the pressures that occurred within it. The storm was a tropical depression that formed near Jamaica on October 15th that year, and immediately to track westward. Within a couple of days, it had intensified to the point where it was classified as a tropical storm, and at this point, it suddenly changed its direction to move south. Soon after that, thanks to explosive intensification, Wilma turned into a Category 5 with sustained winds of 185 miles an hour. Fortunately, these winds dropped to 150 miles per hour by the time it crossed the Yucatan Peninsula, and it moved into the Gulf of Mexico as a Category 2. Not yet done, it increased again to a Category 3 with wind speeds of 120 miles an hour. It made landfall in Cape Romano, Florida, and then down to the Atlantic before disappearing. Having affected the islands across the Caribbean, the main effects of the storm felt in Mexico, Cuba, and Florida, where it caused 52 deaths and $22.4 million worth of damage. It was, however, the last major hurricane to strike the U.S. mainland for just under 12 years, which became these last to bring after such a destructive season. 4. Hurricane Gilbert, 1988. In terms of its barometric pressure, Hurricane Gilbert most intense Atlantic hurricane on record, and it was one of the largest with a diameter at one point of 575 miles. It was the third hurricane of the 1988 season after forming on September 8th to the east of Barbados, and it continued to increase in strength as it traveled westward into the Caribbean Sea. Within 2 days, it was classified as a hurricane and became of Jamaica on September 11th. It was a powerful storm to have hit the island, but after it passed back over water, it intensified to Category 5, 85 miles an hour. Weakened slightly, still a Cat 5 when it made landfall at the Yucatan Peninsula before emerging in the Gulf of Mexico on September 15th. Finally making landfall in Mexico the following day and dissipating by September 9th in the western U.S. Its 9 days of Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico killed 3, caused almost $3 billion worth of damage in 1988 prices. Number 3, Great Labor Day Hurricane, 1935. Holding the record for being the most powerful known Atlantic hurricane to make landfall in terms of its pressure, as well as sustained wind, Great Labor Day Hurricane is believed to have first begun forming just north of the Turks and Caicos Islands in late August of 1935. By the 31st, it was off the coast of Long Island in the Bahamas, and it began intensifying in such a way that it was at hurricane strength when it reached Andros Island on September 1st. Then, with an eye measuring 10 miles across, it changed direction towards Florida and began to explosively intensify. It struck the Keys on September 2nd, and at this point, Category 5 with sustained wind speeds of 180. After passing the Keys, it moved along the Florida coast and made landfall again at Keys, and for traveling out into the North Atlantic. Another storm on September 10th, thought to have killed 423 people and caused $100 million worth of damage in 1920. It left a path of destruction in its wake, and forced the nation to wake up to potential dangers that could come from storms like these. It was also the first hurricane that an aircraft was study and track. part of a program of storm surveillance. I know far more about development for future disaster prevention. 2. Hurricane Allen, 1980. Although ranking 5th in terms of powerful Atlantic hurricanes like Hurricane Allen holds the strongest wind speed detected in an Atlantic storm. It was a Cape Verde hurricane that developed a tropical wave that had begun on the African coast and had become a tropical depression by August 1st of 1980. Of how dangerous it would become, so it was a further 24 hours before an alert was issued about it by the National Hurricane Center. It was intensifying around 1,300 miles to the east of the islands. It continued to increase in power, and by August 5th, when it was to the south of Rico, it had become a Category 5, earliest ever on record at the time. It would continue to weaken and strengthen, with winds at their peak reaching miles an hour, which ravaged Haiti and caused hundreds of deaths across the Gulf of Mexico and make landfall on the border between Mexico and the U.S., where it particularly affected the lower Texas. By the time it had dissipated, the storm had killed 209 people and caused $2.6 billion of damage in Haiti money, with Haiti suffering the majority of it. Number 1. Hurricane Patricia, 2015. Record for the most powerful winds ever detected in a tropical cyclone worldwide. Hurricane Patricia began developing near the Gulf of Tehuantepec, which is to the south of 2015. To begin with, it progressed slowly and became a tropical depression by October 20th. The environmental conditions became growth, and as a result of explosive on October 22nd, it grew to a Category 5 in just 24 hours. By October 23rd, peak, which frightening 250 miles per hour. At the end of the day, it had weakened as it made landfall. Wind speeds of 150 miles per hour. It was the most powerful Pacific hurricane. Terrain, it turned into a tropical depression and had dissipated by the end of October 24th. It was enough time to have caused widespread flooding and damage across Central America, but for a storm that holds record, it seems that only 13 deaths and less than $500 million of damage attributed to it. I'll see you next time. Nature play. Back, relax. Unusual rain. Bright sprites of red light. Halos from the heavens. Here are the top 15 strangest skies. Number 15, fire rainbow. Fire rainbows, which are also known as circumhorizontal arcs, are a phenomenon that occurs when sun or moonlight are refracted through specifically shaped ice crystals within cirrus or stratus clouds. It's something that you have a good chance of seeing in the U.S. during the summer each year. But while the arc is often referred to as a rainbow, it's not actually a rainbow at all. Strange halos are formed when light enters the vertical side face of a flat hexagonal ice crystal that's horizontally oriented and exits along the bottom face. Because the ray is refracted almost 90 degrees, the colors are clearly separated. And while you may see a fragment of a fire rainbow quite regularly, the chances of seeing a fully formed halo are much more rare. The actual light that's formed will take on a perfectly circular shape, but it's the presence of the clouds that will often make these arcs seem almost like flames lapping in the sky. To take place, not only does there need to be the right type of ice-forming clouds in the sky, the sun has to be very high, at more than 58 degrees, which means that it's impossible to see the solar versions of them at locations north of 55 degrees north or south of 55 degrees south. Los Angeles is one of the best places to witness this phenomenon, because the sun is higher than 58 degrees for 670 hours each year between March and September. So if you ever want to see one for yourself, that's the place to go. 14. Red Sprite. From the ground, bright flashes of light in the sky during thunderstorms. Further up beyond the clouds that form these bolts, there's an electrical phenomenon called a red sprite. Thought to be triggered by the formation of light between a lower cloud and the ground. They occur at altitudes between 31 and 56 miles, often appear in clusters of reddish-orange flashes. While they may themselves look like lightning, red sprites are actually formed by cold plasma, which means the process that creates the flashes is much more similar to the production of light inside a fluorescent tube. Immediately prior to a sprite formation, red halo can be seen. When there's a massive thunderstorm below, they may also form blue tendrils that reach down.
It's extremely difficult to see them from ground level, however. Some of the best images have been taken from space. Because of this, very little is known about the actual conditions inside a red sprite. Several high-altitude aircraft and balloons are thought to have been severely damaged by them. Almost certainly more powerful than the lightning we're more familiar with. Number 13. Sun halo. As the name would suggest, a sun halo is an atmospheric phenomenon that leads to the formation of a halo of light that surrounds the sun in the sky. There are a number of ways they can form, but normally it's the result of the presence of ice crystals that are suspended in the atmosphere inside cirrostratus clouds. The most famous type is known as the 22-degree halo, which looks like a ring around the sun that has a radius of 22 degrees. It's formed when light bounces off virtually randomly arranged ice crystals. But crucially, they don't reflect any of the light back towards the sun. This results in the sky within the halo being noticeably darker than the sky that surrounds it. And it's often misidentified as the sun forming in the heavens. Number 12. Noctilucent clouds. Noctilucent clouds, which translate from Latin to mean night shining, are some of the highest forming clouds in the atmosphere, and take on a very strange appearance during twilight. Consisting at between 47 and 53 miles high, very little is known about them. And because they're so thin and transparent, it's almost impossible to see them during the day. And the reason they become visible after the sun is set is because of the curvature of the Earth. It's only possible to see them during the summer at locations that are between 50 and 70 degrees north and south of the equator. Once the sun is lowered beneath the horizon, the light still illuminates high up in the atmosphere, while the lower layers of the atmosphere are darkened by the Earth's shadow. It means they stand out. It makes them very difficult to study, and researchers still aren't sure why they form. They appear to be linked with pollution levels and large-scale changes in the upper atmosphere. Records suggest that their frequency and brightness have been increasing in recent years. Number 11. Zodiacal light. We're used to the world being illuminated on the moon, but there's a phenomenon called zodiacal light created by dust in space, known as the false dawn. Chances are that you've actually seen this in real life, as it's a triangular-shaped light that appears in the sky following sunset or just before the sun rises. In our planet and throughout the solar system is a pancake-shaped collection of dust known as the zodiacal cloud, which has been formed by debris left behind by comets. When it's at the optimal angle in relation to the Earth and the sun, it will reflect the sun's light back onto the dark side, while light pollution and a full moon will overwhelm the zodiacal light and make it invisible. It's a phenomenon that has been observed for centuries, with some of the first astronomers writing about it and trying to understand its causes. Amazingly, it was Cassini who first proposed it was the result of dust particles, having deduced the cause with his relatively primitive apparatus in 16. Number 10. Fall streak hole. Fall streak holes are one of the strangest sky phenomena you'll ever see. They've long been associated with powerful gods, transcendent aliens, because they look so much like a portal to another world. Forming in cirrocumulus or altocumulus clouds, they appear as a large gap, usually circular, within the otherwise blanketed sky. There's actually a complicated process behind their formation, and they occur when the temperature of the water in the cloud water itself has entered a superfluid state where ice crystals haven't yet been formed. They finally begin to take shape. An effect called the Bergeron process takes place whereby the water droplets around the ice crystals actually begin to evaporate and therefore leave an empty patch of sky where the clouds once were. The introduction of ice crystals into a region where this speed up the process and are often associated with planes that have flown through the clouds and done this. Number 9. Crepuscular rays. Crepuscular rays, which are more commonly known as God's rays, are a specific type of sunbeam that can often be seen shining through the gaps in clouds, or through permanent objects like mountains or buildings. Quite often they appear to radiate from where the sun is. Surprisingly, this is actually an optical illusion, and they are instead parallel to one another. Sometimes they can stretch across the entire sky and appear to meet again at the other side. This is perspective. Rays form during twilight when the sun is below the horizon and become more apparent as the sky gets darker because of the contrast between the light and the dark. Orange in color, because the light's path through the atmosphere sees it travel through up to 40 times as much air as midday rays. It gives more opportunity to refract its wavelength. We are constantly adding more people to the top production team. All the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. Mammatus clouds. Mammatus clouds are an unusual type of cloud formation that look like pouches hanging beneath other clouds. Hence the reason why they were given the Latin name mamma, which means udder. They aren't actually classified as a cloud in their own right, but instead a supplementary feature that sometimes occurs on other clouds. You ever see them forming, it's usually a sign that a powerful storm is on its way. So much that the pilots are taught to avoid them at all costs. They look like smooth protruding from beneath a parent cloud. Each one can be up to 2 miles across. The exact means of their formation is not fully understood. It's thought to be linked to sharp variations in temperature, moisture, and wind speeds, that cause water droplets to cool, fall, and then reheat again, all while being contained by circular wind patterns. There are, though, several different theories, including the influence of gravitational waves, cloud melting, and thermal reorganization, showing that the scientific community is by no means aligned on precisely why mammatus clouds happen. Number 7. The Belt of Venus. Just before the sun, just after it is set at night, you might see a strange atmospheric phenomenon called the Belt of Venus. It forms in the opposite direction to where the sun is. Glow in the sky that rises above the horizon due to the backscatter of leaden sunlight, known as Rayleigh scattering. In the evening, as time progresses, the Earth's shadow rises from the horizon, and the Belt of Venus rises even higher into the sky as it bounces off the fine particles in the atmosphere before dissipating. During different times of the year, the color of the effect can change between a vivid pink to a reddish orange, and it's a similar process to the one you see when the moon is red hue. The hazy light gets its name due to its position in the sky. At no point will the planet Venus ever appear within the phenomenon, and so the two were historically thought to be linked. Number 6. Ball lightning. Normally, we think of lightning as either a sky without any definitive position or shooting down in a bolt towards a specific point on the ground. There is, however, another way in which it's formed that's more unpredictable than its counterparts, to such an extent that it's not entirely certain if it exists or not. Known as ball lightning, thought to be an electrical phenomenon that sees a spherical ball of luminescence that can range from the size of a pea to many feet in diameter. Lightnings have usually been thunderstorms, but ball lightning is said to last a lot longer than the split-second lifespan of a bolt. There have been a number of accounts of ball lightning throughout history, including claiming that it occurred at ground level and left a smell of sulfur. It's been possible to create it in a laboratory too, but examples of it happening naturally are incredibly rare. Number 5. Pyrocumulus cloud. Pyrocumulus clouds, which are often also called fire clouds, genitus, are ones that often form near volcanic eruptions or widespread fires. The air at the surface becomes incredibly hot, so it rises and eventually settles at a point of stability in the atmosphere, which is usually where there's a dense region of moisture. This then condenses to create a huge cloud formation, one that's associated with extreme turbulence and, on occasions, the production of dry lightning. The presence of ash from the preceding fire means that the clouds are usually gray in color. Which can be a blessing for airfarers. Rain can help to extinguish the fire that's caused it. But if there's enough lightning, there's a chance that further fires can be started if it happens to strike a region of dry vegetation. Number 4. Morning glory clouds. So-called morning glory clouds are a rare phenomenon. A band of long roll clouds, sometimes more than miles long and more than a mile high, form relatively close to the ground. There may be one of the clouds on its own, or as many as 10 alongside each other. And when they form, there's usually unpredictable surrounding winds that make them extremely fighter pilots. The clouds can travel at up to 65 feet a second, form new growth on the crest while dissipating at the rear. There are very few places in the world where they occur, and there's only one location where they are foreseeable enough to develop, the southern region of the Gulf of Carpentaria, on the northern coast of Australia. Here, because of the unique geography of the land and sea, they form every year and have been documented ever since 1942. Due to their rarity, formation isn't fully understood despite several research projects, but it's believed to be related to a very precise balance of wind direction, moisture, and atmospheric pressure. Similar formations are occasionally seen in the US, Europe, and Russia, but in no way as predictable a fashion as in Australia. Number 3. Long flash is an incredibly rare phenomenon that looks like a powerful searchlight moving around in the sky. So unusual that they're often interpreted as being mystical. Those who see them tend to refer to spiritual experience. Commonality between all sightings is that there's a brightened crown of a cloud, and an aurora-like stream burst out towards the sky. But the rate at which the direction of the light beams move is almost unbelievable. As they're very uncommon, further research into their formation, researchers believe they understand in theory the causes. It's all to do with the arrangement of ice crystals within cumulonimbus by powerful electromagnetic effects that orient the crystals in the same direction. And when the light shines into them, it's refracted away and appears like beaming light. For some reason, however, the direction of the electromagnetic field can rapidly change, likely discharges like lightning flashes within the cloud. This causes the ice crystal to instantly move into an alternative orientation. This changes the direction that the beam of light is shining in a fraction of a second, and can result in the light seeming to dance across the sky in a mechanical way. To see one, you have to get precisely the right position to see the refraction of the light, because the beam is generated from within the cloud, which means that if you are lucky enough to witness a crown flash, you should stay and watch the show, because others have ever been able to. Number 2, lenticular clouds. A lenticular cloud is a large type of stationary cloud that form at altitudes of up to 40,000 feet and take on a peculiar saucer-shaped form. They're formed when wind blows and encounters large obstacles. Results can be spectacular. Mountains, volcanoes, and even large buildings will severely disrupt the way that wind can flow through a region. It produces eddies in a similar way to what happens to water in a river. When this happens, and if the warmer air that contains water droplets flows over the eddy, the moisture can begin to condense and start to form a cloud. The circular nature of an eddy is why lenticular clouds take on such a smooth lens-like shape. While those that live in mountain regions may be quite people who live in flat terrain won't have seen anything like it. Because of this, that lenticular clouds, especially when they form in places where they're less common, are linked with an increased number of UFO sightings. People become convinced that such a perfect shape can only be the result of an intelligent design, not simply weather formation. The winds within them are extremely turbulent too, which means that pilots of powered aircraft will actively avoid them. Pilots see them as enjoyable weather systems if possible to fly into. With such huge uplift of wind at the edge of a lenticular cloud, it's possible to reach great heights in a matter of seconds, which resulted in the gliding records for distance and for height both being set thanks to one. Number 1, aurora. The most famous atmospheric phenomenon in the world is aurora borealis, an effect that occurs close to the Earth's North Pole where charged particles are ionized and release photons that produce spectacular displays of light in the sky. They're also seen in the Antarctic too, where they're called the aurora australis, and these molecules are just as incredible, if not a little more difficult to travel to see. Visibility of the aurora is surprisingly predictable. Patterns can be charted on maps in the same. Typically, they're only visible between 10 and 20 degrees from each pole, and are clearest on a dark night. The region where you can see them at any given time is known as the aurora oval. Because this is an effect that's linked to the magnetism of the Earth, however, it's possible to see them much further beyond the usual area when there's a geomagnetic storm, but also not just linked to the Earth, the solar system, particularly on Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. Subscribe to Live for more and check out some of our other popular videos.
Something like it's a plastic. Oh, break it down. Oh, break it down. Oh, break it down.
Trees are frequently cut to make room for human expansion. What happens when they need to cut down this? A tree so large, cutting it down seems like an impossible task. Here are the top 15 largest trees ever cut down. Giant cedar, Canada. Giant cedars are a tree species that are native to the Pacific Northwest, and they're one of the most common species you'll see throughout Canada. The country's climate is perfect to encourage them to grow to unbelievable sizes. While most of the largest are protected, there are some that need to be removed to help sustain the forest around them. This giant cedar has just about reached the end of its life, so to create space and prevent it from falling naturally and damaging others, the decision was taken to remove it. A move of 15 feet, and remaining this is no task, and the workers can't simply cut one slice through it and control its fall. Instead, they cut a large groove on gives enough room to fit in a chainsaw to make a cut through the rest of the trunk. The specimen actually had a hollow trunk as the result of its old and decayed state, which made it much easier to cut through. When it finally came down, the tree was cut up into smaller sections to take away the process, and the stump was cleared so the tree could be planted to grow in its place. 14. Douglas Fir, Oregon. Douglas firs are one of the largest evergreen tree species in the world, some coastal specimens growing in excess of 300 feet. Most of them don't reach anywhere near this height, however, and in large forests in Oregon, away from the ocean, they typically grow to around feet. Any that become larger than their surroundings is often made that they should be cut down. The amount of wood that's provided for careful management also reduces the demand for others to be felled. So in effect helps to save many more trees too. In 2019, this 180-foot Douglas fir was cut down by the Southern Oregon Tree Service. To begin with, they use their chainsaws to cut out an angled wedge, which will determine the way that it falls. And then they make the final cut through the rest of the trunk. After a day's work, the tree falls with a massive splash in a nearby lake, and it can then be removed to be processed. Giant Redwood, California. Giant redwoods are the largest trees in the world, and the best place to see them are the coastal forests of California. Individuals can grow hundreds of years and can reach heights of more than 300 feet. There has been a long history of felling giant redwoods to provide the lumber for construction, but more recently the practice because of how long they take to replace. On occasions, though, the trees will die of natural causes or need to be removed for safety reasons. This is what happened in 2002 with this growth redwood. Growing on private property, it already lost its top section from thorn, and a crew was called in to safely fell the rest. They made an undercut to gain a trunk, and after 6 hours of work, it was on the ground. This was just the beginning of the job, though, because it then had to be cut into 20-foot logs, which themselves had to be quartered. Then were they light enough to be carried away by a Boeing 234 Chinook helicopter. 12. Big Fir Tree. Golf courses rely on their picturesque surroundings to create a suitable environment to play the game. Trees are allowed to grow well. For players and to aid the maintenance of the green, sometimes trees have to be removed. But this isn't simply a case of making a cut across the base of the trunk, because something tall and heavy falling onto the golf course could cause a huge amount of damage. This is what happened in 2016. The company was called in to help with a 120-foot tall fir tree. To begin with, the workers stop and cut all of the branches away, and then start to remove the trunk in 10-foot segments. Definitely slow progress, but by far the safest way to a tree like this, both for the person actually doing the work and for those around. Cottonwood trees. Cottonwood trees are some of the largest hardwood trees that grow in America, and often reach heights in excess of 100 feet. While they're valued for their appearance, this is a species that's still regularly cut down for the wood, particularly those that have grown on the edge of the forest. It needs to be done very carefully, however, because if the tree was to fall into any of its neighbors, then it could inflict serious damage to them too. One of the best methods to do this safely is by using a jack rope and wedges, which allows you to carefully control precisely where it lands. The ropes are attached to nearby trees to support the trunk and prevent it from tipping over too early, but also later on are used to exert pressure on the tree to ensure it goes in that direction. It's a tried and tested process that's been used for decades, one that ensures no further destruction falls beyond that of the actual tree that's being felled. Number 10. Large cedar. If you're lucky enough to own property on a lot of land, the chances are there'll be plenty of trees that have been there for much longer than you have. This can prove to be a real problem when you're trying to build any developments. While you can quite often work around them, sometimes there's no choice but to remove the tree altogether. In 2017, this homeowner was faced with this when planning a new garden layout. needed to remove a stunning cedar tree with a trunk that was at least 5 feet in diameter. To this size, it would have been several hundred years old, but in just 20 minutes that had come to an end. It did, however, already show signs of rotting roots and was about to suffer from the spread of disease. That's as good a time as any to clear it out of the way to allow other things to grow. Armed with a McCullough Super Pro 81, after being unsuccessful with an axe, he cut a wedge to begin to control the way the tree falls, and then completes the cut across. Number 9. Huge Redwood, New Zealand. With its temperate climate and regular rain, New Zealand almost specifically designed large trees to grow. Giant redwoods are a common sight, and provide a dangerous safety hazard. In 2016, residents noticed that a huge tree along their street was beginning to waver in the wind. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that the roots had begun to lose their hold. All it would take would be a strong storm to pass over, and this tree would have almost certainly fallen over in an uncontrollable way. So the decision was made to remove it piece by piece. They attached a crane to each segment before cutting through the trunk below, which meant that as soon as it was free, the crane could carefully lower the heavy wood without risking damage. During the process, they found that the 145-year-old tree was actually rotting from the inside too, which means it was far more precarious than they had even thought. We are constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production. All the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. Mountain Ash. Alfred Nicholas Botanical Garden in Melbourne, Australia. They have specimens on display. One of the most spectacular parts of the venue was a large rock boulder featured by the entrance that was overlooked by a huge mountain ash tree. Once the tree had died, it began to shed its branches. This was becoming increasingly dangerous for visitors. It was therefore scheduled for removal. An expert crew was called in to handle the work. They began removing left of the unbelievably big branches, and then were able to tackle the main trunk itself. Due to the other valuable trees nearby, it was important this was done without risking any damage else, so this tree went down in stages, with each segment being carefully controlled as it fell to the ground. Once finished, they were then left with the awesome job of putting all the wood through the chipper, so it could be used to cover pathways throughout the gardens. Number 7. Sugar Pine, California. Native to the Pacific coast of America, the sugar pine is the tallest of all the species of pine tree. They naturally grow to around 200 feet. Some specimens can be far more than that. This particularly unusual speed at which they can attain some heights, often in half the time of the next fastest grower.
Hey, Winston, what do you think of the
Explosions. So realistic.
Amy again, aren't you?
Maybe.
This 195-foot tall sugar pine in Strawberry Valley, California, is only thought to have been just over 100 years old by the time it was decided that it needed to be cut down. With so much weight, it's something only experienced people should do. So if you make one wrong move, it could spell disaster. He cuts a wedge to guide the fall, and then makes a slice through the rest of the trunk, apart from a small section in the center. At this stage, the weight of the tree means that it firmly stands tall, and he needs to hammer wedges into the other side to force it to topple over. This is truly backbreaking work, but after several hits, he hears the tree begin to crack, and runs to safety just before it goes. Number 6. Welsh Giant Redwood. Think of giant redwood, easily think of the country of Wales, but after introduced there a few hundred years ago, they've proven to be able to grow quite well. Many of them are protected and highly prized, but in 2018, one was controversially cut down. The 90-foot tall tree, which had been planted in Swansea in 1842 by a botanist who imported seeds from around the world, was one of the first to have been grown in the whole of the UK, and had become a local celebrity in its own right. It was much larger than other trees in the area, but the people behind a new housing development decided it was in the way it needed to go, along with 69 others. The problem was they didn't have any permission to do this. They were quite aware that it was illegal. Still, they went ahead with it. But the following year, despite claiming it was done accidentally, the company responsible for the act was fined the equivalent of around $500,000. Number 5. Parnell Creek Giant. The largest tree in the world today is a giant sequoia in California called General Sherman, which has an estimated volume of 52,500 cubic feet. This doesn't mean, however, it's the biggest to have ever lived. And in the 19th and 20th centuries, a number of contenders to the crown were cut down for their timber. The one that's thought to have been the biggest is the Cornell Creek giant, which is believed to have been 17% larger than General Sherman, and is the largest known tree to have ever existed for which photographic evidence. It absolutely dwarfs anyone seen standing next to it, which makes it all the more of a shame that it was cut down in 1911. Felling it was to simply provide wood to a nearby manufacturing plant, but at the time it's unlikely to be quite how special this tree actually was. Number 4. Prometheus. While it wasn't the largest tree to have ever grown, the oldest known tree on the planet. In the 60s, a researcher was conducting tests on it, which resulted in it being cut down. It was a Great Basin pine that was growing amongst other pine trees in Wheeler Park in Nevada. The researcher, as a graduate student, had been given permission to take samples from all the trees. Things didn't go exactly to plan. While trying to remove the trunk of Prometheus, borer got stuck in the wood. Instead of leaving it there, he decided to cut down the rest of the tree to retreat. And it was only then that he realized a big mistake. As it toppled over, he saw the huge number of rings in the stump, realized that he had cut down a tree that was older than any other a person felled. It appeared to be around 5,000 years old, predating the known civilizations in the region at the time, and from all accounts, it was still perfectly healthy, still growing, which means it was ever tragic that it met such an anticlimactic end. 3. The General Noble. The General Noble tree is regarded as the largest tree to have ever been cut down. It was a giant sequoia that, according to reports from the time, had a growth of 95 feet, at a height of 300 feet, and a diameter of 26 feet. While many trees like it had been protected for a long time, it was chopped down in 1892. No images exist of the tree before it was felled, and controversially, rather than being cut down for its wood, this tree was used to create an exhibition for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition that was held in Chicago. The 30-foot section of the trunk was installed.
On to extra innings. And now the center fielder, Ton. And a pitch. That one's in there. That's strike one. As a pitcher, you know the runner on second with the speed. A base hit. A big run.
In the government building, which contained a spiral staircase to reach the second floor where visitors could see a cross-section that allowed them to touch hundreds of concentric rings from centuries of growth. It proved to be such a popular exhibit that following the exhibition, instead of being disposed of, it was relocated to a position on the National Mall in front of the Smithsonian. And it was fitted with windows and a roof before being used as a tool shed. Vines began to grow around it, the wood began to decompose, and it was finally removed in 1992. The Lindsay Creek Tree. The Lindsay Creek tree was a coast redwood growing in Fieldbrook, California, and is generally regarded as the largest single-stem organism that has ever existed in history. On the banks of Lindsay Creek, which feeds into Mad River, it was said to be 390 feet tall, had a trunk diameter of 1 feet, and had a total estimated volume of 90,000 cubic feet. Loggers visited the site several times in the early 1900s with plans to cut it down. They decided that it was simply too big for them to be able to successfully. They made some test cuts in the trunk, which weakened its structural integrity, and in 1905, nature finally did the job for them, during a powerful storm. Loggers were quick on the site when they heard about this to harvest the wood and retrieve material that weighed in excess of 7.26 million pounds. This means the tree was over twice the size of the world's current biggest tree, General Sherman, and the equivalent of the volume of 2.5 747 aircraft. Number 1. The Mammoth Tree. Nowadays, giant trees are regarded with respect. After all, to get to this size, they've been growing for hundreds of years. This wasn't always the case, however, and they were only seen as a natural resource until a controversial event took place in 1853, which is credited with sparking the conservation movement. On June 27th that year, gold prospectors felled a 300-foot giant sequoia that was at least 1,200 years old after 3 weeks of cutting through its trunk. This wasn't to provide resources, though. The only reason they began to cut it down was bet. So the story goes, the men were playing a game of poker one night and were discussing the massive trees that had recently been discovered in the region. The debate began about whether any of them were big enough to be able to carve a cross-section that could be formed into a table with enough space for 30 people to sit around it. They set to work to find a potential candidate and found one that's become a mammoth. and after chopping it down, they found it was more than big enough. As well as the table, a section of bark was sent to Broadway and had a piano inside it to entertain spectators, and another was sent to San Francisco. Stumps, which can still be seen today, became a tourist attraction in its own right. A hotel was built nearby, and regular tea dances were held on it. At one point, there was even a bowling alley on the tree's remains.
Exhorts his team regarding a deficient area of production.
Subscribe to Top 5s for more and check out some of our other popular videos.
And welcome in, everybody. Glad you're with us. Down at the plate. This is at the initial near right field, Sanchez. On the move.
I definitely
He's
noticed
got it. And
the sensitivity in my because I
first with one gone.
turn animals into its
Romero. Runner on the field.
The entire universe condensed into a rock that can fit into the palm of your hand.
Steals the bag.
Nature is
Bottom half of inning number 2.
here are the 50
Here's the center field.
rock formations.
Next pitch is popped up.
Galaxy opal rock. All the precious gems that are retrieved mining around the world, opals are one of the most spectacular and mystifying. The opal capital of the world is a town called Cooperpedy in Australia. It's where the most impressive specimens have been found, and some of them are being. That's because the stones, called precious opals, have a unique structure of silica spheres on the microscopic level. Reflect light across their microstructures to create wonderful iridescent displays. One of the famous types looks as if it has a galaxy trapped inside it. There's also others that look like contain rainbows, fire, water, and even light that glow under light. 14. Sudak. Sudak is a 3,640-foot tall mountain in Rogaland country, Norway, which is known for its spectacular view of surrounding landscapes from the summit, and for having one of the world's highest waterfalls. There's a highly unusual rock there that draws tourists from far and wide to see it, because it has somehow become white. Others over a daunting precipice, known as Sudak. The 180 cubic foot rock is thought to have been deposited there when the glacier was melting at the end of the Ice Age more than 50,000 years ago. It was squeezed into position so tightly that it's removed since. Hanging 3,208 feet above the valley floor, it's a perfect photo opportunity, and in recent years has become a popular starting point for base jumpers. Most exhilarating rides of their lives. Number 13. Rainbow Quartz. You may have seen quartz before. Unbelievable prices in the local jewelry store. The surprising thing about this gem is that it isn't actually a natural formation at all. It starts life as quartz, which developed crystal formations over thousands of years underground. Crystals have a natural electrostatic charge, and this is used to apply a layer of titanium, sometimes gold, a process that's called magnetron ionization. Multiple layers of the metal are added. Appearance effect for the light that's bouncing off. This results in us seeing glowing waves of iridescent metallic colors. Surprisingly, this process doesn't affect the structure of the crystal at all, so it remains as long as it was before the metal was added. Number 12. Split Apple Rock. Split Apple Rock, which is known locally as Apple Rock, can be seen in Tasman Bay, which is on New Zealand's South Island. It just so happens to look like an apple that's been cut in half. The strange formation is made up of granite that dates back to at least 66 million years ago during the Cretaceous period. Quite how it came to look like this is not entirely clear. It's thought that the cleft that split it along was a naturally occurring plate of weakness through the rock, which is quite common with granite. Hundreds of thousands of years, the waves of the ocean exploited the weakness, broke it open. The Maori, however, they believed it was split by two gods who were confused which one was more powerful. 11. Bismuth crystal. Bismuth is an unusual metal with surprisingly poor ability to absorb heat, and the title is one of the most diamagnetic elements that we know of, meaning that it will repel any magnetic forces that comes into range of. But about it is the shape that its crystals form in certain conditions. When found naturally brittle and white, or slightly pink in color, but if it's dissolved into liquid
with at least
crystals, it becomes something completely different. Shape is almost
piece is
like structure that occurs as a result of higher growth rate on the outside edges that happens on the inside edges. Furthermore, when bismuth oxide